Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank very much to the Faculty of Social Science, as well as Professor Fang, Professor Zhen for having me here. I'm so glad to have this opportunity to be here to share one of my recent research. A little bit different from previous fabulous presentation, I'd like to look at the issue of social inequality from a public policy perspective. So the title of my presentation is Segmented Housing Definancialization in China. The research background is that YA Global North studies only recently began to pay attention to the role of state in housing production and finance. Urban China studies had long recognized the predominant role of the state in housing production. For example, how the state has deliberately leveraged housing assetization to boost domestic consumption in response to the 2008 global financial crisis has been the focus of many researchers. However, the counter trend very important aspect of this process, i.e. the revival of affordable housing schemes that took place almost during the same period of time, had been largely ignored in existing literature. However, this counter trend of definancialization is actually very important. Since financialization in China is actually orchestrated by the state, so the way the state controls the process and outcome is equally important as the way it creates and promotes financial instruments and housing markets. Another important question, i.e. the whole question, has also not been well studied. I.e. in this process, who has been financialized and who has failed to catch up with others is very important for us to understand the fragmented process and also to understand the profound impacts of financialization on social inequality as well as well-being. So against this background, our research aims to examine two questions. The first one, how housing financialization in China is simultaneously facilitated and managed by the state in Chinese cities. And second, how the statecraft around housing definancialization might reshape social inequality and rather than subject well-being. So the focus here actually departs from analysis of capital flows and aggregate data, but centers instead on a socially embodied process of housing financialization. Our data draws from 2 rounds of intensive fieldwork, first during 2009 and 2010, when affordable housing schemes were first tried and formulated, and the second round of fieldwork was taken during 2019, when the whole system and relevant policies have been well established. The interviewees include officials in multiple level governments, private and state-owned developers, as well as those beneficial families of affordable housing. In order to save time, I think I will skip the review of theoretic framework, but first to examine the revival of affordable housing in China and Shanghai. In order to understand the logic that why Chinese state were involved in the provision of affordable housing is to understand that actually the recent transition of urban governments in China goes beyond neoliberal governments as in many Western societies. Although after market reform, market mechanism has been almost introduced and deployed in other aspects of urban lives. However, markets is only one of the instruments of urban governance. So the logic of housing financialization in China goes beyond financial market and speculation itself. On the contrary, as important as economic development for Chinese state is social stability. So the slogan is known as development is the ultimate truth and stability is the ultimate task. So therefore, after the global financial crisis in 2008, economic development was given the priority. For the central state, it is very important to revitalize housing market to sustain economic development. So it implemented various tax and financial deregulation to facilitate housing financialization. However, interestingly, it was actually in the exactly same policy document, the central state decided to increase the provision of affordable housing. It is well believed that actually housing affordability is actually a prerequisite for social stability, and this is particularly important if the housing price was to be further pushed up. In addition, the central state also learned lessons from the prime mortgage crisis in the United States. So they decided that housing finance should not be, must not be extended to the low-income groups. So accordingly, the whole housing system has been a very comprehensive system. I will take Shanghai as an example to illustrate the system. Actually, Shanghai was always been the leading municipality in housing marketization. So the government totally retreated from the provision of affordable housing since 1998. So in 2008, at the request from the central state, Shanghai municipality responded very quickly and formulated a very comprehensive housing system. And in line with the policy from the central state, we can note that actually the whole housing system income spectrum of housing from financialization to definancialization. First, commodity housing was purposely promoted to sustain economic growth in post-financial crisis era. And second, relocation and resettlement housing was provided to all the residents displaced by the shantytown renewal programs. But this is actually also an integral part of state's financialization strategy, because the ultimate purpose of this scheme is to leverage the money compensation of those residents into housing market. Third, shared ownership housing. This scheme aims to support home buying of those low to middle income families. Lastly, two rental housing schemes represent the state's efforts to secure production of labor as well as social stability. Public rental housing usually targets very specific posts of labor. For example, such as those well-educated young university graduates. Cheap rental housing was designed actually to fulfill the very basic housing needs of the lowest income groups in cities. Now, let me explain a little bit more about shared ownership housing, which is something just in between in the spectrum. Actually, this policy model was imported from the UK, but actually the operational model was actually very different. First, all the properties will be invested and developed and also shared owned by the government. And second, for the buyers, the shared the share of the ownership is fixed and at the initial proportion and cannot be increased afterwards. And after a restriction period of 5 years, if the buyer purchased 100% of the ownership, the property could be treated as commodity housing in housing market. So apparently, this is actually an integral part of China's broad asset-based welfare regime, and also it also reflects the financialized logic of the shareholding state, i.e. As the shared owner for the preservation as well as the increase of the value of state-owned asset is a very important consideration in designing this scheme. However, the logic goes beyond value capture because holding shares is also a very important instrument of the government to manage speculation. As a share owner, the government sets various restrictions on the use as well as the resale of the property in the form of legal agreements. What is very interesting about this scheme is that essentially this scheme is to address housing difficulties of those low-income groups by lowering the threshold of ownership. However, the price of all the share ownership housing was just a discounted price with reference to the commodity housing nearby that project. Or in other words, you can know that the price is actually is actually related to the market price rather than the salary or income or the affordability of the beneficiary families. For example, if we look at this table, I just try to compare the total cost for buying affordable housing flats with the asset limits in eligibility criteria for apply this flat. And you can know that there is actually a very huge gap between the two, which means for the applicant household, if they want to buy a property, that financing is a must-have. Because initially when the government initiated this program, as a result of the scheme design, there image a paradox, i.e. Those who can afford this scheme, they actually cannot afford it. But on the contrary, those who do qualify actually cannot afford this scheme. But in order to address this dilemma, interestingly, the government did not lower the price of these properties, but instead they soon introduced favorable loan policies because for those low-income groups, they actually, for them, it's very difficult to obtain commercial mortgages. So housing provident fund loans, which was under the municipality's responsibility, became the major instrument for supporting this program. So by 2021, nearly 60% of buyers of shared ownership housing use this type of loans. But if we compare some very specific details, such as the total mortgage loans, down payment requirements, or loan interest, we find that there is actually very little difference for HPF loans for buying shared ownership housing or commodity housing. But a very particular family mortgage was actually offered to shared ownership housing buyers. Under such circumstances, intergenerational cooperation based on welfare eligibility and financial capacity is very common. Or in other words, it is very rare that the parental generation provide welfare eligibility, but they still need to rely on their children, i.e. those financial capable younger generation to get out the debt. So you can know that this mortgage eligibility became very effective measure for the government to assess the earning and financial capacity of the lower income families. Apart from this, we also found there in Shanghai, there are still a small number of families, they hold very conservative attitude towards mortgages and loans. So they manage to get the property by either selling their own houses or borrowing money from their relatives. But we found that for those families who actually failed to use full borrowing capacity, so very little improvement in their living conditions. According to the initial design, the ability to cash in the appreciated value of shared ownership housing is key to achieving the goal of asset-based welfare. However, ironically, because the government sets various constraints on resale-based properties, those beneficiary families find it very difficult for them actually to retreat from this scheme. One way is to sell their shares to the government because However, because the property became very expensive, actually those government, they do not have any incentive to buy the remaining shares back. Another way for the families to retreat from this scheme is to sell the properties on the housing market. However, they also found this is quite impossible. First, because during the 5 years, as in Shanghai, the rise in the household's income is much less than the growth rate of housing price. Without the remaining shares in the hands of government became very unaffordable for those families. In addition, it is also required that when the families, if they want to buy the property back from the government, the money needs to be paid in cash, and mortgages are no longer available. In addition, in 2016, the government initiated a new restriction, i.e. for those families, they could not buy extra commodity housing in the market unless they retreat from this scheme. However, when applying these houses, most families actually listed all their family members either to obtain the qualification or to obtain mortgage. As a result, along with this policy, it means that for the younger generation, they could actually, it would be impossible for them actually to own properties of their own. As a result, for those families, most of them were very not buying full ownership housing in the market, and they felt very frustrated as a result. For example, one interview is that looking back, I should have grit my teeth and bought a house on the market. I should be grateful for this, but speaking from the heart, actually it seems that I was still fooled. Most families we interviewed were actually not hopeful about buying out from the government. Some interviewees, for example, was very optimistic. We now think we will stay here until death, but there's no way to get the money. It would be too expensive if the state were to sell it based on the market price. So just a very brief conclusion. I think what we can see from the case of China is that the Chinese state in the past decades has not only or simply enabled housing financialization, but actually very carefully designed a housing system to segmented housing financialization, and different groups of different segments of population have been entitled to differentiate access to financial tools, and the strategy actually has included as many families as possible for housing financialization, meanwhile excluding those low to income families to reduce financial risk and to maintain social stability. However, in terms of social consequences, because home ownership now in China has become essential for household wealth accumulation as well as for asset-backed welfare. Those low to and middle income families excluded from financial services or constrained by financial regulation have actually been frustrated by constraints of assetization, or in other words, they might have kind of missed the opportunity of wealth accumulation. That's why in a great sense, they are not merely so-called uncertain or unwilling subjects of financialization, but actually became kind of losing ones. Or in other words, under such circumstances, this scheme has in effect or in reality reinforced social inequality. Right. So that's all for my presentation. Thank you very much.